Hey howdy, hey folks, it is Mrs. Johnson with the Agri Wisdom channel. We are doing a whole segment on color genetics, specifically today about where genetics come from and where they are, like background information, before we jump into color genetics. And when I say color genetics, I mean things like coat color, eye color, polled, non-polled. Those are all things that we can see physically with our eye. That people in agriculture like to play with and experiment with, and we see lots of examples in the agricultural world, whether it's different colored flowers and irises and roses and things, or even like the really cool, pretty coat colors on dogs and horses and cats and rabbits and all the things. So, before we can identify the genetics that make those things cool and awesome and interesting, so then we can then replicate them in our own agricultural practices, we need to figure out and understand, at least briefly, with a very brief overview, where genetics come from and what genes are. So, DNA, genes, they're housed in every one of our cells. In a living human, or living being. I'm so sorry. It's after work. I'm excited to record these, but my brain's obviously not on. So, DNA is housed in cells. All the cells in your body. In a thing's body. And inside each cell is a nucleus, which holds chromosomes. Chromosomes have a centimeter and a telometer, which is not important for us today. Will be important if you decide to go down the genetics route or the microbiology route at some point, but not today. Today, we're going to keep it brief. And on each one of those chromosomes is DNA. DNA is a information library for the cells to reference in order to remember what they're supposed to be doing, basically. And so, a good example of that, my hair is brown, and it's curly. And, as you can see, I don't have obscure hair on my arms or things, but how do my hair cells know how to do that? Well, first and foremost, my body has created hair follicle cells that their job is to make hair and grow hair. And so my body does some of it by just assigning a task to a cell. And once a cell has a job, say my hair follicles, they're like, okay, cool, I know what I'm doing, I know what I'm supposed to be making, I'm going to do this thing. And so they go through that genetic library, that DNA, to find the genes that correlate with the thing that they're doing, whether it's digestion, hair color, eye color, behavior to a certain degree. So, the hair follicles in my hair have found the genes responsible for hair color, hair texture, hair length, all those things, gathered all that information up and been like, and followed the rule book of the genes to be like, yes, this is the rule book of the genes in the DNA of stuff. To be like, yes, this is what Jamie's hair is supposed to look like. This is what Mrs. Johnson's hair is supposed to look like. And your cells do the same thing. Horse cells do the same thing. Dog cells do the same thing. Plant cells do the same thing. And they use this library of information to figure out what that thing is supposed to look like, or do, or function has. Has kind of a brief overview. Now, we're going to talk about how we go from a single cell having that information to spreading that information throughout a whole organism, which is mitosis. That's mine. Mine. Mitosis is mine. So, which is how I remember it. Mitosis is how my own body replicates cells when I grow or they die off, and essentially the whole function of mitosis is to make me have more cells. And so they don't go anywhere. They're not for kids, they're not for children, they're not for any of that. That's mitosis is for me to have all the cells that I need to have to be me. And with all of this, there's, little odds and ends that can go wrong, but we won't cover those today because that's getting in the weeds. Meiosis, on the other hand, so meo, and I kind of think of it as like me and someone else. Meiosis is how an organism that sexually reproduces creates DNA strands that are not like their own in order to give a child DNA from them. Sexual reproduction works by getting half of your DNA from your mom or the mother figure of the thing and the dad or the male figure of the thing. And so meiosis, me and someone else, is the cell reproduction function that makes sexual reproduction exist. That's how you get, say, my dad had really straight black hair and my mom had brown curly hair. And so they split their DNA down the middle, they mixed it up, and they each gave me half of what they had made and what already exists in their body. And so I got half of each, which is why my hair is brown and curly. And my hair is darker than my mom's. Not quite as dark as my dad's, but darker than my mom's. So, which doesn't always mean that I got more of my mom's DNA. Doesn't always mean that I got more of my dad's DNA. It just got all mixed up in some convoluted cell madness, which you can dive into deeper later. And so when we're talking about color genetics, we're using meiosis. We're using a mom and a dad to identify the options for the child. And so, just has an example of this reinforcing example. Chromosome from parent 1, right? So, in order to be a viable child, you have to have chromosomes that match, that are the same length from the same creatures combining into one cell. Chromosome from parent 1 and chromosome from parent 2, you can see that they both have a variety of a tall gene, and that child is going to get whatever that combination is. And in this case, we're talking about sweet peas, which is really easy to understand because there's a lot of data on it and a lot of science on it. And actually, pea plants are how we learned about genetics. And we did a lot of cool agriculture stuff with learning about that. But that being said, they also have other genes on them for the wrinkled and smooth. And you can see in this photo specifically on the left-hand side that just because two genes might be connected or related to each other doesn't always mean that they're going to be right next to each other in the DNA, right next to each other in this big long strand of code, this big long library of information. Sometimes you have to pull out several chapters throughout the entire length and pick out bits and pieces like you would writing a research article in order for this one cell, the hair cell on my head, to make the hair that is supposed to look like my hair. And how do we represent that? We represent that through a couple of different ways. We can use a family tree structure of the sorts on this left-hand side. So SS, little s, and the gametes, this is important, the gametes are the pieces of or are the parts of the DNA that you get from your parent. So, right, this tall gene here has a T. This one also has a T. The chromosome from parent 2 also has a T. Right? Chromosome from parent 1 has a wrinkled gene. Chromosome from parent 2 has a smooth gene. And we kind of see that play out. So, right, big S, little s. Big S, little s. Right? So, this one, a parent has two big S's. So, they're always going to give a big S because that's the only option. This one has two little s's. And so, no matter what you pick, that gamete, that sex cell, is always going to get a little s. And so, you can kind of demonstrate and conceptualize how some of this is going to work through a family tree of sorts. Right? So, this child is always going to have a big S and a little s because each parent only has the option to give them one of each. And if you were to crossbreed someone with two people, two living organisms with a big S and a little s, you would end up with other options. And at this point, down here, with these sex cells, gametes, these precursors to a child, you see how it's kind of hard to understand kind of what the possibilities would be if a parent can throw both a big S and a little s, which is where Punnett squares come in on the right. And so you can see it takes these gametes down here that could be thrown by either parent in the second generation and separates it from the father and the mother on the left-hand side to show you that if both parents threw big S's, and the way this works, right, S here means you draw it all the way down. SS. So big S, big S. And then this little s here goes all the way down. Little s, little s. Same thing here. So this big S goes all the way across. S, S. This little s goes all the way across. S, S. And you can kind of see things start to play. And I won't go into terribly much detail because my next video is about vocab. But I just kind of want you to see how we would diagram some of these things that are happening in the DNA, in the chromosomes, on the genes. And this is how we would take all this information that we just learned about, and, it can be, no one wants to look at this big, crazy, long mess of things and be like, okay, that means brown. So we shorten it into typically letters. And typically there's a capitalized letter and a lowercase letter. And we just go, that whole gene gets assigned A, B, C. And I know that A means blonde. I know that B means, brunette. And so there's a lot of pieces that you could probably mix around and play with and see. And once you have a better understanding, it's a little easier to kind of do some things. But there's that. And I know it's a little convoluted right now. I promise you, just hold my hand. We're getting there. We're getting there. I promise. We're learning things. This is just precursor stuff, so it's going to make more sense soon. I promise. And so, ta-da! Last but not least, let's review. Punnett squares show parental gametes and their genotypes of the next generation. So that has some big words that we haven't covered yet. But you can see male, diploid, Diploid means mitosis. No? Diploid means meiosis. Female diploid means meiosis. So, out of the two options that mom and dad can give you, or a sire and a dam can give a foal, those are the two options. And you write those two options. And then you write each one across the bar. Right? And so, if you wrote it on the top, it goes all the way down in that column. If you wrote it on the left-hand side, it goes all the way over on that column, that one letter. Because we're demonstrating the possibility of getting either option. And you can kind of see, and you can kind of start to see where homozygous, heterozygous kind of come in, because there's 2 big letters, 2 little letters, right? In the dark purple and the white. There's 2 big letters, 2 little letters, and then you have a mix of colors. Dun dun. Right? And so, I want you to kind of see that. There's 2 big letters, 2 little letters, and then a mix of a big and a little letter, which is important. We'll cover it, I promise. This sounds convoluted, I know. Just hold my hand. We're getting there. Okay, what did we learn today? Hopefully, we learned that genetics is the study of DNA markers, that library of DNA, genetic information, 4 traits that parents pass down to their children. And we might not really understand how that makes sense right now. We might just go, genes are things that happen in DNA, and cells use them to do things. And that's great. Cells use that genetic information to do things. You're absolutely right. In the next couple videos, we're going to talk about some examples to hopefully make all that convoluted, crazy stuff about Punnett squares and family trees and all the things make a little more sense. Okay. I will see you in the next video. Have a great day. I hope you learned something. Please stick with me. Genetics can be hard when you first learn it. But I promise you, knowing the color of your foal or your dogs, puppies, or your cats, kittens, that's the fun part. And we're getting there. Just hold my hand, we'll get there. Okay.